Wikileaks founder Julian Assange is a step closer to being extradited back to the U.S. to face espionage charges.
The case is now in the hands of Britain's Interior Minister after a judge approved the extradition earlier today. Assange faces 17 espionage charges and one computer misuse charge for publishing classified documents on his Wikileaks website more than a decade ago. He's been avoiding extradition since, arguing he's entitled to First Amendment freedom of speech protections.
Joining us from London with more is CBS News congressional correspondent Chris Van Cleve. Hi, Chris. So as we mentioned, Britain's Interior Minister will decide whether to grant the extradition. If that happens, what are the next steps in this case?
Right. So it's not done yet, and that's fitting for this saga that's drug on now for more than a decade, right? So the Home Secretary here will decide whether or not to grant extradition. That seems relatively likely. But if he does that, grants the U.S. the right to extradite Julian Assange back to the U.S., Assange's lawyers can appeal that. And before the Home Secretary can make his decision, Assange's lawyers have 4 weeks to submit their arguments why the Home Secretary should not allow the extradition. In the past, they have argued that because he could face more than 100 years in a U.S. prison, that confinement in the U.S. would be inhumane. The U.K. Supreme Court didn't buy that, and that's what allowed this judge to make the ruling today. So if it's granted, Julian Assange's lawyers can appeal once again to the U.K. Supreme Court to try to overrule the Home Secretary. And at that point, he'll be out of appeals. But still, this will not be a quick process, as it will be at least a month before Assange's lawyers have to submit their arguments, and then the Home Secretary makes the decision, and then there's an appeal process. We all know from court cases in the U.S. that the wheels of justice can turn slow, and they've certainly turned slowly in this case.
All right, so even assuming that they continue to turn slowly, what happens to Assange should he finally arrive back in the United States?
So Assange right now is sitting in a British jail and has been there since 2019. Remember, he spent 7 years holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy here in Britain trying to avoid extradition to Sweden. Those charges were eventually dismissed because basically the statute of limitations had run out. He was then arrested on other charges and has been held since. He has supporters here. There were protesters outside the court today. If he is extradited, he will face 18 charges in the U.S., 17 of them dealing with espionage. This is all from that 2010 Wikileaks disclosure of classified U.S. documents. The allegations are that he aided the former Army specialist Chelsea Manning in distributing these classified documents that put U.S. service members' lives at risk. Of course, Assange has said he didn't do anything wrong, was acting as a journalist, and therefore should have freedom of speech protections.
All right, Chris Van Cleve with the latest on the Assange extradition case. Thank you so much.